Hello and welcome to Scream Scene, the horror movie podcast where we watch every horror movie ever made in chronological order and then we rank them from best to worst. My name's Sarah.
And I'm Ben.
Thank you so much for listening to us today. How are you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing pretty good, Sarah.
Spring has sprung here at Castle Scream Scene.
Yes, that's certainly true. How about yourself, Sarah?
Enjoying the weather. I love when it's like warm but cold. You know what I mean?
Okay, no, I don't.
Like it's like slightly chilly. It's like a good 10 degrees Celsius. And it's like, ooh, I can wear like a shirt but no coat. And I might be a little chilly, but once I start moving, I'll be perfect.
Got it.
Like the perfect temperature.
I see. Okay. You and I disagree on what the perfect temperature is.
Our thermometer knows this well. Well, tell us what we are watching today, Ben.
Today, Sarah, we are watching Homicidal from 1961, directed and produced by William Castle. Yes, it's William Castle time.
Dun, dun, dun. Cue the lightning strikes.
Our last William Castle picture that we saw for the show was the kids' horror movie 13 Ghosts in episode 301.
20 episodes ago then.
Which we ranked number 169 on the list.
Not bad.
For comparison, we covered Macabre in episode 229 and ranked it number 34. House on Haunted Hill in episode 258 ranked 33, so one spot above. And The Tingler in episode 275 ranked at 90.
So, yes, 13 Ghosts ranking isn't good in the sense of comparing to other Castle films, but it's not bad when you look at the scope of the list.
Sure, yeah. How many pictures are currently on the list, Sarah?
298, and
wow.
Quite a few on the not horror list, but of course that doesn't count, so nearly 300.
Wow. So, the question tonight is, will Homicidal reverse or continue Castle's downward trend?
Would you say it's homicidal or homicidal?
I mean, so listen, I say homicide and homicidal, but in a lot of these older movies from like the 40s and 50s, we have consistently run into people saying that they're like from the homicide squad.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it could be homicidal. I don't think it makes a difference.
I mean, maybe if they say it in the movie, that's the way we should go.
Got it. So once again, our screenplay is by Rob White, who wrote all the previous Castle horror pictures as well. This time, there's definitely a distinct influence here from Psycho. This movie was really seen as William Castle's response to Psycho, which is ironic because Psycho was really Alfred Hitchcock's response to William Castle.
Yes, we're coming a little full circle Ouroboros here.
Yeah, people kind of forget that like Psycho had a William Castle style gimmick, which was that no one was to be admitted late to the picture, which people forget is a gimmick because it just sort of became how movies worked after that. Now, the thing about Homicidal as a film and its biggest similarity to Psycho has to do with its twist ending.
Oh.
And there's a good portion of behind the scenes of this movie that I can't talk about without spoiling that twist ending. And unlike Psycho, whose twist ending has, sort of just been spoiled by cultural osmosis at this point, Homicidal's not as well known. So I guess my question is, Sarah, should I forge ahead and talk about the twist ending and the behind the scenes stuff around that? And we'll just, give everyone a spoiler warning, but you'll be spoiled. And anyone who ignores the spoiler warning will also be spoiled. Or should I wait until after we've seen the picture to talk about those elements?
Well, you see, Ben, through the magic of editing, I can put your spoiler stuff in here, even if you talk about it after we've watched the movie.
So if this is the case, I'm going to hold off on talking about the behind the scenes elements of this movie that will spoil the ending until after we've seen the picture. And we'll see if it makes a difference or not. If you clock what the twist ending is, within 5 minutes of the movie starting, it'll be oh, okay, never mind. This wasn't worth it. But we'll find out. We'll find out if the twist ending can legitimately surprise you then, Sarah.
Cool.
Okay.
Did you spoil yourself by doing the research?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Somebody's got to do the work. Castle scored quite a get for the cinematography of this film. Veteran camera op Burnett Guffey. Born in 1905 in Tennessee, Guffey started as a camera assistant in 1923.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then was promoted by John Ford to second unit cinematographer by the following year.
Can you imagine being promoted by John fucking Ford?
Yeah.
Holy moly.
He worked as a first unit camera operator for Paramount from 1927 to 1943 before becoming director of photography at Columbia in 1944. At Columbia, he shot 20 films noir, becoming well known for a clear visual style and his artistic shot selection. Guffey believed in keeping lighting simple and natural while using shadows and depth to create atmospheric moods. Some of his best-known films include All the King's Men from 1949, In a Lonely Place from 1950.
Oh, that's Nicholas Ray, right? With
yeah.
Bogart?
Yeah, that's right. And From Here to Eternity in 1953, for which he won an Academy Award. After Homicidal, he would work with Castle again on Mr. Sardonicus before lending his talent to Birdman of Alcatraz in 1962 and Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, for which he won a second Academy.
Good for him.
Yeah, it's a high level talent for Castle to be working with, frankly.
How do you get him? Maybe he was a fan of Castle because Castle has such notoriety. He's kind of cultivating this personality around him.
My guess is that it's probably a little more mundane than that, which is just that Columbia was Castle's distributor.
Oh, well, I'm going to go with my version.
No problem. The film's score is by composer Hugo Friedhofer, who was born in San Diego in 1901 and got his start at Fox in 1929. Before moving to Warner Brothers in the 1930s to work as an orchestrator for composers like Max Steiner. Eventually, he rose up to become a composer himself and scored classic movie scores for over 50 films in his career. Some of his best-known works include Lifeboat from 1944, The Best Years of Our Lives.
Oh, that's a good movie, too.
From 1946, for which he won the Academy Award.
Yeah.
The Bishop's Wife from 1947. Oh. Joan of Arc, 1948. And The Sun Also Rises, 1957.
Cool. Some very cool people in this movie.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
Working on this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. The lead actress in this movie is Joan Marshall. And she was born Joan Schefferman in 1931 in Chicago. And you can probably guess why she changed her name to Joan Marshall for her acting career. Now, she was 17 when she contracted polio, which temporarily paralyzed her head, face, neck, and spine. She couldn't talk. She got better, obviously. And after her recovery, she began her performing career initially as a showgirl in Chicago and then later in Las Vegas. She was 30 years old when she shot this picture. By the time of Homicidal, she'd appeared on film and television in a lot of bit parts. She'd already been married twice, but she hadn't really been in anything major. This is her first lead role. She's playing a character 10 years her junior in this movie. And after Homicidal, she would continue to appear in like mostly bit parts in TV and film. On the TV side, she would play the very Morticia-esque Phoebe Munster in the original pilot version of The Munsters.
But not the regular show?
That's right, because that character was considered to be too similar to Morticia, so she was retooled into the more familiar Lily Munster, who's played by Yvonne DiCarlo in the regular series. Star Trek fans will also recognize Marshall. She played Starfleet JAG attorney Ariel Shaw in the classic episode Court Martial. She's Kirk's old flame who has to prosecute against him in that episode.
Yeah, that's a good episode.
Her final acting role was in the 1975 satire Shampoo, where she plays a version of herself because that movie's kind of a like meta comedy about director Hal Ashby, and she was married to Hal Ashby. He was her third husband. She did divorce him, and after she retired from acting, she married twice more, so total 5 husbands. And ultimately, she passed away from lung cancer in 1991.
Okay.
Marshall's male co-star in this movie is Glenn Corbett, who classic Trek fans will also recognize. He was the original Zephram Cochrane, the inventor of warp drive in the episode Metamorphosis. Mm-hmm. Corbett was born in 1933 and had served in the U.S. Navy before becoming a model and then an actor. He appeared in a number of westerns on TV and in theaters throughout the 1960s. His biggest role was probably as the co-lead on the TV show Route 66 in that show's 3rd and 4th seasons. And he also passed away of lung cancer in 1993. The cast is rounded out by actress Patricia Breslin, who appeared on the TV version of Peyton Place and would later marry NFL mogul Art Modell and become a prominent philanthropist. Russian stage actress Eugenie Leontovich, and also a familiar face to people who watched a lot of TV in the 60s would be Hope Summers, who appears in this film but is best known as Clara Edwards on The Andy Griffith Show. So the true gimmick of Homicidal is the twist ending. However, for the picture's like traditional William Castle promotional gimmick.
Yeah, the marketing gimmick.
Right. Castle came up with the fright break. So
did he partner with Kit Kat?
No. So the idea behind the fright break was that in the 2 minutes leading up to the picture's climax, about 20 minutes before the movie ends, a countdown would appear on screen. And if someone left the theater at that time and went to the front office, they could go to the manager and be refunded if they were too scared to see the ending of the movie.
That's not so much a break as it is chickening out.
Right. The break is the 2 minutes while the countdown is on screen, during which time you can go get your refund. So Columbia Pictures, William Castle's distributor, thought this was a terrible idea.
Yeah, they don't want to lose money.
Exactly. It's 1961. We're losing audiences to television. But of course, Castle always felt like this stuff would bring in more audience members than you would lose over like, oh, what movie's so scary that they're offering this like refund if you're too scared, right? So they decided to open the picture in some theaters and do some test screenings to see how this would go. And the initial test screening, the initial premiere screening of Homicidal was in Youngstown, Ohio, chosen because like if things went wrong, it was like far enough from anywhere that mattered that no one would hear about it. And they had a like sellout show for the premiere. Things went great, and nobody got up during the fright break to get their refunds. And it's like, okay, cool. And the executives were like, right, but let's see how the second show of the night goes. because, maybe the first show, like everybody just wants to see what the fuss is, right? So they see the second show of the night. And at that point, at the fright break, everybody goes up to go get their refunds. And they're like, what's going on here? Sarah, do you know what's going on here?
They want to see what's up with the fright break. Like, they want to see if they can do it.
So that was partly it. Like, people were curious, like, am I going to get real money back? Or is it going to be like, oh, here's
another gimmick thing?
Or like, here's a ticket, like a free ticket to another show or whatever, right? What am I going to get back? But no, what had happened was people were staying in the theater from the first show into the second show. And then having seen the movie, they could then leave during the fright break for their refund, having lost nothing, because they saw the climax already in the first show.
I had the assumption that they had fucking cleared out the theater, but why would they? That's not a norm yet.
Exactly. Yeah, because you're not in a multiplex era yet, right? So you just run on the one screen all day.
Yeah, 24/7 people come and go. That's why Psycho's gimmick was so unique.
Exactly. So Castle was like, okay, we need to fix this problem. How do we fix this problem? So he instructed for theaters showing Homicidal, if you went to see the 5 o'clock show or the 7 o'clock show or the 9 o'clock show, you printed the ticket in a different color. And then when you went to get your refund, you had to present your ticket to the front office. So if the color of your ticket didn't match the show you were asking for a refund for at that time, then they knew you were trying to game the system.
That's pretty quick thinking, because that's also fairly easy for the theaters to implement.
Mm-hmm. However, 1% of tickets were still refunded under this system, which Columbia Pictures found unacceptable. That was too high of a rate of refunds. So after the first few screenings had gone this way, Castle added an additional factor to the gimmick called the Coward's Corner. The way the Coward's Corner worked did require a bit more buy-in from the theater. This was a little closer to like the days of installing a joy buzzer in every chair kind of stuff, right? So what they did was, in the aisles of the theater, they put down like yellow fluorescent tape with like arrows. And then when the fright break happened and you had your 2 minutes to leave, if anyone got up and left, a yellow spotlight would come on them and follow them up the aisles along the line. And then you had to go in the theater to this little yellow cardboard booth where there'd be this theater employee in like a little yellow nurse's outfit. And they would offer you a blood pressure test and then give you a card that you had to sign. And the card said, I'm a bona fide coward. And then once you'd signed that, then you could leave the theater and go to the front office and you would present your I'm a bona fide coward card to the manager to get your refund.
Nice.
So at that time, the refund rate dropped to 0.5%, which was an acceptable number.
The poor person who's getting up just because they really have to pee.
Right, exactly. Just mercilessly mocked. So Homicidal was released on June 28th, 1961, and it grossed $1.6 million at the box office, making it another William Castle hit. Critics were mostly unkind. Everyone picked up on the film's similarity to Psycho, and most compared it unfavorably. You know, there was a lot of like suggestions that William Castle needed to learn from Alfred Hitchcock, like how to make a movie, which is a little insulting given that it was Hitchcock's appreciation for Castle that led to Psycho, right? But everyone saw this as like the cheap knockoff. There was one major dissenting voice, which was the film reviewer at Time magazine, who declared that the picture surpassed Psycho, was superior in its structure, its storytelling, like everything across the board, and named Homicidal one of the best films of 1961.
Damn.
Yeah, like top 5.
You know what? Like, if Homicidal avoids a 5-minute long scene at the end where someone hams to camera about the psychological underpinnings of our lead character, I'm willing to consider it above Psycho. For a reminder, everyone, Psycho, I believe, is ranked at number 1.
Yes. In later years, directors like John Waters and Brian De Palma have praised Homicidal, and some regard it to be one of Castle's best pictures. It is available on DVD and on Blu-ray. We recommend the Indicator Blu-ray box set of William Castle pictures, and it can also be rented on YouTube, Amazon, and iTunes.
Well, folks, if you'd like to watch along, there's where you can find the film. You're going to hear a brief musical interlude, and when we come back, we will discuss Homicidal from 1961, directed by William Castle.
See you on the other side, everybody. Welcome back to Scream Scene. We just finished watching Homicidal from 1961, directed by William Castle. Sarah, what did you think?
Well, it is convenient that William Castle introduces the movie, so we know it's homicidal instead of homicidal.
That's right.
This movie is very, very interesting. I think we'll have a lot to say. I think it is a bit of a hidden gem, but it also kind of shoots itself in its foot.
I thought this was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's like a hidden gem, but I think it's like we'll get into this, I'm sure, but like I think it would be natural for a modern audience to view this movie as problematic, we'll say. And I think even if the movie isn't maybe as problematic as it maybe seems at first glance and has a lot of interesting stuff going on in it to like dig into, that probably hurts it a little bit in terms of like a modern rediscovery. Does that make sense?
We will get into this, but I don't know if it's problematic, Ben.
I just feel like I think that would be a pretty understandable knee-jerk reaction.
Yes.
And I can see why it would make this movie difficult to recommend. Like if you're recommending hidden gems,
yeah,
it's difficult to recommend the ones where you have to like put in a bunch of caveats about like, but don't worry, it's okay actually.
Well, why don't I give the synopsis so we can stop beating around the bush?
Yeah, absolutely.
So as I said, William Castle gives us an opening. He's like, oh, this movie's about people who are homicidal. And he holds up a cross stitch that says the name of the movie, which is like very silly to me. Then the next thing we see is the film opening with these two kids. There's this one little girl who is like playing with her doll, and then her brother comes in and like takes the doll, and she's like, "Wham, Warren, no!" And it seems pretty innocuous, and also like, why would you choose this to open your horror movie? It's not even like the kid, like the little boy, like takes the doll apart. Like nope. He's the homicidal maniac. Like he just takes the doll.
Mm-hmm. And then we like immediately cut to like years later. So you're left going like, what was that about?
Yeah.
Don't worry. It turns out to be incredibly relevant.
In like contemporary day, we open on a blonde woman. She has kind of a bob, these bangs. She feels very much like a Betty Draper kind of figure to me. And she is arriving to a hotel. She introduces herself as Miss Merriam-Webster, kind of emphasizing that she is single. And I wanted to point out, because yes, her name is Merriam-Webster, that dictionary was established in 1831.
Yeah. So the joke was funny then as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And she asks for the young, handsome bellboy to help with her bags. As they head up to her room, she propositions him, but not in the way you think. She offers him $2,000 to marry her tonight. And he's like, oh, that wouldn't be too bad. You're very good looking. And she's like, no, it's going to be immediately annulled. So lots of mystery going on, but he agrees because that's a lot of money. So that night at midnight, they come together and they head to a justice of the peace who was, I believe his name was a Mr. Adrams. So he does the ceremony and then he goes to congratulate the bride and she takes out a stiletto dagger and stabs him multiple times. And the movie, like the sound effects, the cuts, like it's all in service of like you literally feeling these stabs.
Yeah, there's lots of blood.
It's great. Great opening to your movie. So she escapes and leaves that bellboy behind. And we follow her from that town where that hotel was. It was called Ventura in California, as she drives to Solvang, which is a little town that is famous in its own right, as one of like the cutest towns in California that has this like emphasis on Dutch architecture. Mm-hmm. And if you go there, there's like a ton of little windmills and there's stuff dedicated to the author of The Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen. I learned all about this in a episode, Weird Wonderful World from Watcher Entertainment.
You do see like some of the cute architecture in this movie, just with like the little like strip mall that like the main stuff is in. It's very like cute and European looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as she heads to Solvang, she goes into this mansion, this very large house. We see that she's taking care of this woman named Helga, who is a mute woman in a wheelchair. She seems to not be able to walk, but she uses this like doorknob handle to like bang on her chair when she's trying to get your attention to communicate something. And we learn that this woman's name is not Merriam Webster, but in fact Emily. And she brags to Helga about the murder. Later, a woman about Emily's age named Miriam,
was a brunette,
she arrives at the house because she's planning to meet her half-brother, Warren. So we learn a little bit that Warren and Miriam were raised by Helga, who was like their nursemaid. And when Warren was an older teen, Helga and Warren went to Denmark, which is why I brought up the Solvang history as a cute little Danish town.
I'll have more to say about Denmark later.
I was going to say the line from Hamlet, but it was going to come out as like something, strange things are afoot in Denmark.
That's not the quote.
So yeah, they went to Denmark and that's where Warren met Emily. And Helga had a really bad stroke in Denmark, so she's been helping take care of Helga, and they've been back in the States for about a year. Now, Miriam has come here briefly because she plans to meet her beau, Carl, who is also like the town pharmacist. But Emily convinces her to stay at the house to look after Helga while Emily goes out to get a prescription filled by Carl. I also just wanted to make a note here because I wasn't sure where to put it. Miriam runs like a flower shop that's in the same strip mall as Carl's drugstore. So Emily goes to get the prescription filled and she tries to sabotage Miriam and Carl's plans. But Carl kind of like turns her down of like, no, you're not coming on the picnic instead. So Emily sneaks into Miriam's flower shop and loses her temper / maybe has a tantrum over seeing a wedding wreath and smashes a framed photo of Warren.
She seems a little bit triggered, I would say, by all the little statues of like brides and grooms and like goes out of her way to like destroy all the grooms.
No, she destroys all of the brides as well. I think it's more about the concept of like wedding.
Yeah, or the concept of
intimacy. That night, Carl is leaving his drugstore and sees that there's that big mess in the flower shop. So he goes in and we see that he's knocked out by Emily and later wakes up from Warren, who had come in from Santa Monica, where he lives, to come see Miriam before heading up to the house. And ultimately, they are kind of concerned for Miriam's safety and a little bit for Warren's safety as well. So when Warren heads back to the house, he asks Miriam to stay the night, basically in their old nursery room. This is when we get a little bit of some more exposition that helps provide some context for that opening scene, because Miriam talks about how like the only fight they really had growing up was when he stole her doll. And then they also talk a little bit about how Helga was an abusive nursemaid, but was particularly hard on Warren. He wasn't allowed to play with his sister. He had very, very strict rules about how he was allowed to be as a kid.
And that their father was abusive.
Yeah, their father was a piece of shit. Always wanted a boy, basically like, so Miriam's from the first marriage when she was born, and because she was a girl, the dad basically drove the mom insane, or at least divorced her. It's kind of ambiguous. And then later married Warren's mom, who then gave birth to a boy. Both their parents are now passed, though. As almost like a way of like reconciling the past fight that they had, Warren offers Miriam to keep the doll. So she goes to bed with it, but then wakes up in the middle of the night to Emily standing over her, and she grabs the doll, leaves, and heads to Warren's room, which is very strange to Miriam because she thought Emily was there only as like a caregiver. In the morning, Miriam asks Emily about like, hey, why were you in my room in the middle of the night? And she completely denies it. You must have been dreaming, all of that. But she does explain that she and Warren are secretly married. And Miriam keeps pressing her on like details and facts of like what is going on. And ultimately, Emily threatens to kill Miriam if she doesn't leave immediately. Miriam leaves and heads back to her flower shop. And that's when she is met by Ventura police, who ask to come in, ask her where she was the night of that murder. But the busboy is with the police officer and confirms that while this is the person who's named Merriam Webster, she does not match the description. Carl comes in and he brings a copy of a newspaper which has like front page news about the murder, as well as like a police illustrator. A police sketch of someone who is clearly Emily.
Yeah.
And he's like, the police have left at this point, and Miriam's like, yeah, this is very strange. Someone was using my name and they murdered a person. And Carl's like, well, the murderer looks like Emily and she knows your name. So it seems pretty cut and dry here. Warren comes in, asking why Miriam left the house so suddenly, and they explain to him this thought that Emily is this murderess. And he's like, I can't really believe this, but if you think it will help, I have a photo of Emily on our wedding day. And so he hands that over to Carl to use to take to the police. Of course, that has to wait until the end of the workday, so Carl heads back to the drugstore to finish working. Meanwhile, back at the house, we see that Emily is getting that stiletto knife specially sharpened.
By a roving knife sharpening truck, which is apparently a real thing.
Absolutely, it's a real thing. Okay.
No, yeah, okay, yeah.
So I learned about this through Twitter many years ago, but there are some places in the States where instead of like an ice cream truck, it'll be a knife sharpening truck. And it just sounds really, really ominous to me that there's a truck roaming, playing like music or a drone sound or whatever to get your attention that, hey, the knife sharpener is here. In the case of in this movie, it seems like she called him for service, and so he would drive up with the materials to like sharpen the knives. Coming back into the house with her newly sharpened knife, she threatens Helga and is basically about to kill her when the town doctor, Dr. Jonas, comes in for a visit. We had met him earlier in the film. He delivered some exposition about how Helga was like a regular nurse for him, and then she quit after Warren was born to be a nursemaid to him for his mom.
And that Helga basically delivered Warren without him around, like the doctor wasn't there for that delivery.
Now, remember, Helga's mute, so she is trying to alert Dr. Jonas that, like, I was about to be murdered. He ends up leaving, and immediately after, we see Emily attack Helga. By now it's evening, and we see back at the flower shop, Warren checks in on Miriam because Carl has left for the police, and she's been waiting to hear back word about if it's a positive identification. He calls her and confirms Emily is the murderer. So Warren is like, I really can't believe this. But wait, she's been left alone with Helga up at the house. I need to go protect Helga. I need to stop whatever is going on. Miriam insists on coming with him. And he's like, no, you don't need to. Like, I have a gun. I'll be safe. And she's like, no, I'm not letting you face this alone. They drive up, and Warren enters the house alone with his gun. Miriam waits. We hear no sound, and so she begins to approach the door. Fright break countdown! The clock comes up on screen. It's like 45 seconds or so that's counting down, and William Castle's voice comes in saying, like, it is now time for the fright break. If you are too scared, leave now. 20 more seconds. And it's like an immediate stop to the movie. Like, the camera's moving closer and closer as like a point of view shot for Miriam, but it's like, oh, now there's 5 seconds. You're a brave audience.
It's really like gilding the lily in terms of tension. Like, because theoretically, even if you ignored the like refund gimmick and stuff, if you were like on a carnival ride or something like this is like a way of like amping up the audience for like, oh, like whatever's going to come next is going to be the scariest fucking shit, right? Like, oh, are you brave enough to see what's in the next room, right? But the movie has actually, of its own accord and its own like filmmaking skill, built the tension well enough that he doesn't really need to do this trick. He could have just not had that in there and just had the slow POV shot with the heartbeat and Miriam approaching, and that would have built the tension on its own just fine. It's really gilding the lily, in my opinion.
It takes the gas out of the car, in my opinion. Miriam reaches the door, and she enters. She doesn't see anything. She's wandering around the house, and it's way too dark. It's way too quiet. She sees Helga, goes to approach her, and her head rolls off. Excellent. Love to see it. Thank you, William Castle. She looks around after screaming and sees that Warren's shirt and gun are like off to the side. And she's like, what is going on? And suddenly she's attacked. Emily comes at her with the stiletto knife, and Miriam is screaming and calling for Warren. And Emily laughs and says in Warren's voice, I'm right here. And then steps back, pulls off the blonde wig, and we realize they're the same person. Warren, I'll say, explains that now Emily will kill Miriam and then will disappear, and therefore Warren will not be held accountable for doing these murders.
It's pre-DNA evidence, after all, folks.
So he goes to attack Miriam, but the attack is interrupted by Dr. Jonas coming back to check in on Helga because she seemed so insistent. And that gives Miriam a chance to get away, grab the gun, and shoot Warren. Then we cut to a little bit later. We're at police headquarters, and Dr. Jonas, Miriam, and Carl are there, and we get a little bit of exposition about how the father always wanted a boy, even to the point of leaving all of the inheritance to a boy who would get it on his 21st birthday, which was going to be in like 2 days for Warren. So because that was the case for Warren's father, Warren's mother, Helga, and the person who handled the birth certificate, who was the justice of the peace, conspired to hide that she actually gave birth to a daughter, not a son. So, hide the gender. Emily becomes Warren and must live as a boy. He's able to come out as Emily in Denmark, but is forced to hide when they return to the States, because otherwise he will lose that inheritance. and he has to wait until he's 21. Like I said, the birthday's in a couple days. So he was going to basically have Emily kill all of the people who would have still known about the secret. So mom's already dead, the justice of the peace has been murdered, and then Helga. But now that Warren/Emily has died, all of that money now goes to Miriam. And that's the end. We get kind of a final shot, a camera shot moving in on that doll that falls and lands on top of a whip that was used to beat the children. So that's the end.
Literally assigned male at birth.
Well, like, I don't know where we want to start, Ben, but like, the reason why I'm like, I don't know how problematic, like, quotation marks around problematic this movie is, because it's literally saying that gender affirming care saves lives.
Sure. Yeah. I think the reason it can come off as problematic is a surface level reading puts this in the category of trans panic films where we view transgender individuals as violent, as dangerous, as psychopathic, as like mentally ill. And so it enters into the same conversation as, yes, Psycho, and also films like Silence of the Lambs and so on.
Yes, but I think there's an interesting conversation, I'll say, going on between the script as written and what the film is doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff to dive into with this. Before we do, I want to talk about Joan Marshall.
Yeah, so the behind the scenes stuff that we skipped in the context setting because we wanted to save the twist.
Exactly. The lead role for this film is a double part, which requires one actor to play both male and female roles. Castle initially thought he might use like just straight up two actors. And then he started to look at casting a man. And his thought was like he'd cast a gay guy, basically, and get a gay actor to play both roles. And that just like wasn't working because
sexuality isn't gender.
Sure. But also, I guess just like none of these men were convincing as Emily. Like you just couldn't buy them as Emily. So Joan Marshall came in and wanted to audition for the role of Emily. And she wanted to persuade Castle that she could play Warren as well. What she basically did was she came in and she, according to Castle in his autobiography, dropped her voice down like an octave and told Castle, like, I can do the male role too. And Castle's like, okay, interesting. And Marshall said, like, let me see the script. I want to read the whole script through to see if like this is a role I want to take. But I promise you I can do it. While she's reading the script, Castle called up makeup artist Ben Lane and said, you've got like half an hour to turn this woman into a man. Show me what you can do, basically. So they applied a bunch of makeup and stuff to her, some of which continued on into the movie in addition to some other things, and transformed her into the male version and she basically had to go down to makeup, get this transformation. She reads the script while she's in the makeup chair, like finishes that. She's like, yes, I want this role. She comes back to Castle's office. The secretary doesn't recognize her. Is like, oh, I don't know who you are, sir. Sends him in. And based on that, Castle was like thoroughly impressed enough to cast her in both roles. Some of what she's got for makeup in the movie is diegetic. So, for instance, when she's Warren, she wears like these dentures to give herself an overbite. And that's actually like in the story. We see when Warren takes off the wig and is like, see, it's me. I've been Warren the whole time. He takes the dentures and puts them into his mouth to be like, you know, do you recognize me now? Right. Other stuff that was done, obviously for Warren, Marshall had her hair cut short and dyed brunette. Now she's naturally a blonde, but they shot all the Warren stuff first. So she cut her hair, dyed it brown, performed with the teeth in her mouth. They also gave a bit of prosthetics. They gave her contact lenses to make her eyes brown. And they also did some stuff on her hands to make her hands look more masculine, things like that. So a variety of different makeup techniques. And then they shot all the Emily stuff second. So even though her natural hair is blonde, it was actually a wig because she had cut her hair short for the Warren stuff. Now, Castle didn't want to give away the twist, obviously. He kind of knew that the movie was going to live or die on, would you believe these are two different people, right? So Joan Marshall is not credited as Joan Marshall in the film. In the opening credits, we don't see any of the actors. It's just like a cast list in the opening credits. And Joan Marshall is credited as Jean Arless. And the way the cast is listed out in the opening credits, it's Glenn Corbett gets top billing, then a bunch of other people, and at the very end of the cast list, it says, and introducing Jean Arless. Then at the end of the movie, the only end credit there is, other than the end, is sort of like as if coming out for a bow at the end of a play. Warren and Emily both come out at the same time in a split screen effect. And it says like Warren and Emily played by Jean Arless. And the whole thing with this was like Castle wanted to pick a name that was gender neutral, which Jean was seen as being, and wanted to have it still be, hopefully, unclear to the audience whether Jean Arless was a man or a woman by the end, which is why like it just shows you both characters and says they were both played by gender neutral name. And he really wanted people to still be debating, like, was that a man playing a woman? Was that a woman playing a man? Like, what was going on there? It's a pretty good trick, and it's pretty convincing, other than the fact that all of Warren's lines are obviously ADR'd.
Not only that, but the ADR voice is bad.
It really gives the game away if you have a sensitive ear for that sort of thing. It's pretty obviously ADR. I think it's even more obviously ADR if you've ever watched like 1960s cartoons, because it doesn't sound like an actor doing ADR. It sounds like a 60s style voiceover artist doing the lines. Now, in Castle's autobiography, he insists that it's Joan Marshall's voice for both performances, that Joan Marshall could alter her voice this way, and that's why she was cast. And that the reason the lines are ADR'd is because once the tooth prosthetic for Warren's big overbite was in, like she wasn't intelligible, right? She would sound like this, right? And that's why it's ADR'd. But the quality of the performance, the nature of the voice, because the thing is she doesn't really drop her voice down for Warren. If anything, ironically, I would argue that Warren's voice is higher. And I think one of the reasons why it made sense to cast a woman is Joan Marshall was 31. Warren's 21, right? So you cast a woman to play a younger man would work a lot better than casting a younger man to also play a woman. And so the voice that Warren has, the best I could give you as a description for it is like, it has a very like
the ADR voice.
The ADR voice, yeah. It has a very, gosh, yes, Batman kind of quality to it.
It has a very feeling of like, I'm going to say this line, and then I'm going to say this line, and I'm saying this line.
It's obviously a male voice, but it's a high register male voice, as if, someone trying to sound like a young man, right? And ironically, Emily's voice, the female voice, is actually pitched lower. She kind of has this like husky voice. So it's not a case of just lowering Joan Marshall's voice an octave to get Warren's voice. And instead, it's more of this like Johnny Quest young man kind of voice. And you're right, it doesn't have the same force of performance as the rest of her performance when she's not Warren.
And some of the delivery of lines don't match the facial performance or even the context of the scene.
Yeah.
Like honestly, the ADR is the worst part of this movie.
And so even though Castle insists in his autobiography that it is Joan Marshall doing the whole performance, I think we have to take a step back and realize that this is William Castle speaking.
Yeah, he has, like, even with the fact that he introduces the movie and the way he does so, he is cultivating a type of persona.
Yes.
And of course, that's going to continue into his autobiography.
Yeah, exactly. This is showmanship,
yes.
right? So I think the ADR is the thing that really gives the game away, unfortunately. I think there was a moment where, like, after the first scene where Warren was introduced, you turned to me and you were like, is Emily Warren?
No, I was like, so Emily's Warren, right?
Yeah. And you even said that, like, if it wasn't for the ADR, they might have fooled you longer.
The first time that you see Warren is in that photo that Emily wrecks. And he just looks weird with the teeth. Like, it doesn't look quite like the teeth match the face.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's kind of weird, but maybe, they're going for that. Like, I don't know, maybe an actor has a weird face. I'm not going to judge.
You know what's the funniest part about the teeth?
What?
So I don't know who decided that, like, to make her look more masculine, they needed to give her an overbite. But then someone decided that when it's Kid Warren and Miriam at the start of the movie, that the, like, 8-year-old boy they hired had to have the big teeth too. So, like, he's clearly got, like, the prosthetic teeth in as well.
Yeah.
It's sort of the implication, I guess, in the story is that he's been wearing these since he was a kid.
I mean, I hope they have changed.
Yeah, they would have to.
That would be even just for fitting, but also hygienic. Now you have me on a spiral there.
I do think if there's an advantage to the ADR voice, it's, certainly that it adds to that weird feeling of disconnect when we get to the final twist and it's like, but I am Warren, right? It's so off that it adds to the off-puttingness of that feeling. But I do think it's probably the biggest thing in the movie that clues you in to something being amiss.
But I think it also kind of works diegetic because Warren's a performance.
Okay, let's get into the conversation of who's the fake identity and who's the real, like, which one's the mask, which one's the real person.
Well, Warren's the mask. He's masculine, Ben.
Sure, that's so fair.
Okay, so here's the thing. They're both a performance. Warren is clearly a performance, has the props of, like, the teeth, the voice, the establishment that Warren was born female. But Emily is also a performance because she is so housewife traditional looking. Like, when I say Betty Draper, I mean, like, season 1 Betty Draper, with the way everything is styled. So they both feel like a performance. Which I think is really interesting because all gender's a performance, but we tend to, like, gloss over that fact.
What's interesting to me is even after, like, at the end of the movie where there is the Psycho style sit here and we'll explain things to you scene, which means that this movie doesn't automatically hit number 1 on the list, as you said at the start of the show. But in that scene, they continue to refer to Warren and continue to use male pronouns.
Yes.
They don't take the view at least the characters in the movie don't take the view that because Warren was born female, that's the quote unquote true identity. And I think there's an interesting argument to be made here about, is Emily a true expression of the repressed woman underneath Warren? Right? Or did Warren think of himself as Warren and just use the fact that he could, 100% convincingly pass as a woman as a part of his murder scheme, right? Like that's the way he presents it, is like, and then I'll be Emily to kill you, and then Emily will vanish and this will all go away, right?
He presents it in that one moment, but otherwise his dual performance has no indication of that. Especially when like no one's around him. We're just seeing, I mean, we don't see Warren solo. It's always with other people, but we see Emily solo.
Yes.
And so in her performance as Emily, there's no indication that like she's doing this for other people. But here's some things where I can kind of speak to what I meant of like the script versus the filmmaking are at, not at odds, but there's a tension here. When we are introduced to Dr. Jonas and blah, 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 he talks a little bit about the murder of that justice of the peace and what makes someone homicidal. And he gives this explanation that there's like that selfishness or rashness of a child that is maybe having a tantrum. You stole my popsicle, I'm mad. But then you have that kind of tantrum in a grown person, and that lashes out through violence, and that kind of violence that is enough to kill a person. So the violence is framed by the movie itself as an emotional outburst. And we can kind of see that in the way that Emily steals the doll back, the way she has a tantrum in the flower shop. Like there is that, like, I have not progressed enough in my emotional maturity past being a child.
And the movie is drawing a distinction in its use of the word homicidal between someone who like is killing in a very like cold, rational, like even like I'm a soldier out at war, there's the enemy, blam, blam kind of thing, versus what you might call like, you know, a homicidal maniac where it's like, oh, this person lost control and murdered someone, right? That's the distinction the movie's giving here.
But in the final explanation scene, the doctor and the police person, detective, hand wave Emily away as a disguise, as just a means for Warren to kill the people who knew about his secret identity.
Right.
That's the only purpose behind Emily's existence.
They're trying to frame it as just part of a plan to get the inheritance. Like it's, you know, an old 1930s Agatha Christie story or something, right?
And it's a very rational approach. It's a very planned. It's not a first degree murder. It's a second degree, you know? Like, so there's that like tension within the script itself, but also when you look at the way Emily behaves, yes, she has that emotional immaturity, but she did have a reason for killing, like a motive for killing the people that she did. So it's not as like cut and dry as the movie is almost like trying to make it. And then when you bring in the fact that we hear about Helga's abuse and like the extreme repression of Emily and Warren, like even Miriam's like, yeah, I don't know if I can ever really forgive Helga for like behaving that way and treating us that way, but she's old now, like kind of a hand wave away. And when you look at Emily as like, yes, she has that tantrum, but she performed as Miriam to do that first murder. She was saying she was Miriam.
Right.
And she destroys the portrait of Warren. So I think she has hate for Warren and therefore herself.
Yeah.
I think she has hate for Warren as representative of the repression that she's had to experience. She's upset when someone teases her about intimacy, despite that she's seeking it out with Carl. And that's because she might not necessarily be attracted to Carl. Carl is the modern or the current day version of the doll. She wants the doll away from Miriam because she wants to be Miriam.
Yes.
She wants to have had that life. She wants to have lived and grown and experienced life as a woman. But instead, she's been beaten and forced to present as male. She hates men because she has that distance to the bellboy as well. Like he's like, oh, so we're going to make out? And she's like, don't fucking touch me.
Yeah.
She kills the justice of the peace for the money, but she kills Helga for vengeance.
So I'm totally on the same page with you. and I spotted this same disconnect, right? Where at the end of the movie, they're trying to tell you it's all like a rational money scheme. And I was like, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I think that contradiction is not necessarily a problem in the script. I think you can sort of justify it in that, like, how the fuck would the chief of police and even Dr. Jonas really be able to speak to Emily's motivations and understand her? Like, they're taking her actions and framing them in a context that makes sense to them, so that they can explain them to Miriam, right? But here's the thing. Emily didn't need to murder anyone to get the inheritance. Like, it's all framed as like, oh, those are the people who knew her secret, so they were the most dangerous to, like, that secret coming out. But the Justice of the Peace and Helga were the people who decided to make that secret in the first place.
Yes.
They've been playing along the whole time, you know, at the request of Warren's mother. They weren't going to reveal it and fuck themselves out of, you know, the payoff before the time was going to come. And the argument that, oh, and he also had to kill Miriam because she was the other potential claimant to the will. Like, no, all he had to do to get the inheritance was nothing. All he had to do was just sit there and wait. The reason to kill all of these people is, quite frankly, the anger at the repression, right? And it's the thing that Jonas talks about earlier in the movie. It's the repressed hate that has nowhere to go, right? And so, yes, Emily, like, planned the murder of the Justice of the Peace because she sets it up in an extremely convoluted fashion and tries to frame Miriam for it, right? But it's coming from this internal place of rage, and you see that when she stabs him 11 billion times, yes. And you see that when she attacks Helga, and you see that when she attacks Miriam. And to me, like, the way she attacks, it's like, why would she kill Helga? Well, because she was abused by Helga. Why would she kill Miriam? Well, because she wants to be Miriam. Why would she kill Adrian's? This is a guy who she never even really met, was just like a clerk, and clearly doesn't remember her now as an adult, because when she says, "Hi, I'm Miriam Webster," he doesn't go like, "Oh, right?" But to me, that anger feels very similar to the anger that I sometimes see transgender people express towards, like, the doctor who delivered them and, like, literally assigned them a gender at birth. Like, you see this kind of, like, villainizing of that person in their minds. And I think that's what we're seeing here with Emily, right? And so I think, yeah, she's homicidal. This is not a rational, thought out inheritance scheme. Mm-hmm. Like I said, she just had to do nothing for that to work. This is about revenge.
And yet she's a sympathetic character because the movie points out repeatedly how Helga, in particular, beat them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and the dad, like, we're shown the switch that he used to, like, hit them. We're told that, like, you know, Warren was never allowed to, like, cry or whatever, all these kind of things. We were even told that
he's completely isolated from anyone.
And we're even told that when he was a kid, that they would force Carl, when Carl was a kid, to fight Warren to toughen him up, right? Like, all of these pieces of abuse. And, you know, I mentioned Silence of the Lambs earlier as an example of a movie that also gets put under this umbrella of, like, transphobic, trans panic kind of stuff. But the stuff with Warren / Emily really makes me think of Red Dragon or Manhunter, the previous story, with, like, the, you know, Will Graham has a speech about, like, feeling sympathy for the serial killer as a child because they were abused in this way, but, like, as an adult, they're a homicidal maniac and, like, cannot be redeemed, right? And that is sort of what we're playing with Warren and Emily here as a character.
And then, of course, to further complicate it, there are times where Emily and Warren truly seem to be separate personalities.
Yes.
Because there are things where Emily has done something and Warren has no clue. Warren says something and Emily has no clue. that like Warren shows legitimate concern for like Miriam that Emily does not. Why would Warren give the photo of Emily knowing that it's going to be given to the police? Like, there are things throughout that point to this potentially also being used as an example, like on-screen example of DID, dissociative identity disorder, which is also referenced in Psycho. So that might be why that's there. It also kind of helps like establish like, well, no, clearly they're not the same person, because why would they do that? And so it lengthens the amount of time that you are willing to like suspend disbelief.
Yeah, and they do that trick for the same reason in Psycho, right? I mean, the scene that really plays it the most here is where Emily leaves Miriam's room in the middle of the night, goes over to Warren's room, and is talking to Warren who's quote unquote in bed. And
yeah, we see like something in the bed.
Right. And it's the sort of, classic like talking to herself with the two different voices kind of gag. And it's after that scene that it's revealed that they got married in Denmark, possibly as just an explanation for like, why did Emily go to Warren's bedroom at the end of the night? Because the other thing we get throughout the movie is these shots of like Warren or Emily undressing that the movie like hangs on for a while. However, I've just reminded myself of a thing I wanted to bring up, which was Denmark.
Yeah, tell me about Denmark, Ben.
Okay, do you know why Denmark in particular is the country picked by this movie for where Emily and Warren were?
No, but I think you're about to tell me.
I am. So Copenhagen in Denmark is where, in 1961, if you wanted sex reassignment surgery, you went. That's where Christine Jorgensen went. That's where, like, Lily Elbe is from, right? The Danish Girl, right? The movie with what's-his-face, Eddie Redmayne.
Maine.
Eddie Redmayne. Right? In 1961, we didn't really have trans issues and transphobia and all this kind of stuff in the mainstream of public consciousness the way that it has come to dominate politics today. In 1961, it was more of like this thing of like, oh, that's really cool that science has like achieved this thing. And Christine Jorgensen, who was an American who went to Denmark for a sex reassignment surgery and came back, like was a celebrity. And it was like, nobody misgendered Christine Jorgensen. Everyone understood that it was like, oh, was this thing, now is that thing, right? Mm-hmm. Typically, articles written about her at the time would use male pronouns to talk about events in her life before the transition and then female for after. But regardless, like that's kind of, it's like, in old movies when people talk about going to Rio and it's like, oh, why do they talk about going to Rio? And it's like, oh, that's because, back in the 40s, that's where you could get a divorce. Same thing here. Why talk about Denmark? Because Denmark's where you can get a sex change in 1961. And that's not what happened here. Because
I mean, maybe that's why Helga took Warren.
Right. But it's certainly, even if it's not literally what happened here, it's a reference that sort of on a subconscious level calls the mind of the audience to this topic. So that's why Denmark.
Sure.
Like gender plus Denmark equals transgender issues would be the kind of word association game that's happening here, right? Code, yeah, exactly.
I appreciate you giving that context. I wanted to give some context about cross-dressing in film up to this point. To establish a scope, American film. Because Europe does its own thing. Some big movies that have cross-dressing that people probably would have seen around this time. First thing that comes to mind for me is Glenn or Glenda from Ed Wood.
Yeah.
But no one would have fucking seen that.
Yeah, it's true.
That was 1953.
You know what? I thought about Glenn and Glenda really early watching this because I already knew the twist.
Yeah.
Because one of the first shot of Emily is her like walking up to like a storefront.
Yes.
Window shopping and like looking at the stuff in the window and walking away, which is the first shot of Glenn or Glenda.
Yeah. Yeah, Glenda is very interesting. This is a tangent, but it's very much Ed Wood being like, yeah, I like to dress as a lady. I'm not gay, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's so strange. Anyways, a major film that would have come out before this, Some Like It Hot in 1959.
Mm-hmm.
Great movie.
Yeah.
Other movies, like, we have, like, you can even just think of, like, Shakespeare, Twelfth Night, As You Like It. We would have had Psycho. Even The Devil Doll has kind of an element of cross-dressing because John Barrymore's character is in disguise as an evil old lady.
Yeah, it's evil Miss Doubtfire.
1935 had Sylvia Scarlett, which was the first Hepburn and Grant movie. By and large, though, there are many more that I'm not going to name because there are many. But by and large, in all of these, comedy is the focus.
Yeah.
The comedic aspect of, like, you're hiding your identity.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, it's a guy dressed as a woman kind of comedy. But a lot of, like, in, like, the Shakespeare stuff, the comedy is, like, how are you going to get out of this one?
Yeah.
It's seen as a plot point or a ploy. Mm-hmm. And by and large, throughout all of these, except for Psycho, we know. Mm-hmm. The audience knows.
Yeah. And even the cross-dressing in Psycho, for as much as Psycho has inspired a lot of conversation about how it contributes to trans panic or things like that, I've always felt like the thing about Norman Bates is not that he is dressing as a woman.
He's dressing as his mother.
Mom. Yeah, it's a specific character, right?
That's the other thing. He took on her persona because he could not handle her not being alive.
Right.
For Warren and Emily, they are both unique people that are also not truly who this person could have been if they had just been able to live as themselves.
Right.
Which I think is what is important to call out here, and why, like, I don't know if this movie deserves the label of being problematic.
I would agree. Like, I think this is a really great film. I think psychologically it's really sound. Like, that's the thing that impressed me the most was how psychologically sound everything was and how subtly everything was done. Like, the way that they talk about the abuse and everything is done, like, it's very evocative, it's effective, and it's also, like, just very tastefully done. Like, when they talk about how the father abused them, how Helga abused them, like, it's enough to get it across to the audience, like, what happened and the level of it, but it's never, like, even when the film goes to these very dark and taboo places, it retains a lot of sympathy and understanding for Warren, and it never feels like it's going to those places for exploitation.
Yeah, I think exploitation is the big thing here.
Which is so interesting to me because Homicidal, being a William Castle film, like, is the B-movie exploitation circuit version of Psycho, which is, because it's Hitchcock, has that A-picture shine. But we have to remember that Hitchcock made Psycho as, like, his version of slumming it. Right?
Yeah.
And, like, he had used his TV crew and he wanted to emulate Castle and this kind of stuff. And honestly, between the two, to me, Psycho is the one that feels more like exploitation. If we're talking about exploiting gender panic, to make, to code characters in a certain way to signal that they're bad people, right? Whereas I think that Homicidal does a better job of setting up its twist. Like, yes, the twist is very shocking, but, like, watching the movie knowing the twist as I did, there's a lot more and better legwork being done to set up that twist and the psychology here than was done in Psycho.
Yeah.
All we really have in Psycho is that Norman is really, like, nervous and kind of reedy and effeminate, and it's because he's got this really, like, overbearing mother. Right? And the mom's very like, oh, you can't be interested in girls, da. And, like, we can kind of understand that she's, like, super overbearing and a huge part of his psychology, but we don't get that sense of, like we know that Warren was abused horrifically before somebody in the last 5 minutes of the movie comes out and explains it to us, right?
Yeah. It's really neat how a movie that's, like, considered knockoff Psycho or whatever, still has so much meat to it.
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, like, I think this movie compares really well with Psycho. Like, I think this is much more than knockoff Psycho. Mm-hmm. As I said earlier, I think it does a better job of setting up Warren/Emily's
psychological profile.
Yes. And ultimately, I think one of the ways that it compares really well with Psycho is the pacing.
Yeah, that's true. So we haven't really talked about the movie.
Yeah, as a movie yet, right? Like, we haven't talked about the film as a film. We've just been talking about themes and character. But like, Psycho's not paced well. I'm just going to come out and say it. It's the number one movie on our list, so I can complain about it like as much as I want, because like, what's it going to do? Like, cry all the way to the bank, I guess. But like, Psycho has an amazing, masterful buildup of tension and suspense up until Marion Crane dies.
Yeah. And
then like,
it has to start from scratch again.
Right. And Norman puts her body in the muck and like, cleans up the murder scene, and that's all good. But then we start over with her sister and Sam Loomis, the hardware store guy that she's in love with. And they're both like not interesting characters at all. And then they meet up with the police guy whose name I forget. And like, they investigate Norman, and Norman kills the police guy whose name I forget. And like, it's whatever. Like, it's very whatever. And then we have a final good buildup of tension when they go to the house and, Marion's in the basement. Not Marion, the sister. I don't remember her name. When she's in the basement and Norman attacks her and he's wearing the outfit, and they turn the chair around and there's the skeleton in the chair and the light going back and forth and stuff. And like, that climax is pretty good. And then we go to the long psychological explanation scene, and the pacing's just really uneven. And I feel like the movie really doesn't recover it. The movie's twist, the big gimmick, the thing that makes it memorable, also kind of means that like, the back half of the movie can never be what the front half of the movie is. Whereas in this film, like, it has that banger opening of this like mystery blonde, and why does she want to get married so soon, and why does she want it immediately annulled, and what's going on, and then stab, 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 and you're like, oh my God, what's going on? And then it does manage to effectively build back from that and keep you interested. And it does it by having like a really consistent pace that doles out information at like a good clip. Like, in every scene, we're learning something new and having a new wrinkle added, and we understand the characters a lot better. I mean, Carl is about as generic as, he's the good boyfriend kind of character can be, but he's not being asked to do as much, I think, heavy lifting as Sam Loomis is in Psycho.
In terms of like what he has to do for the plot.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely.
And Glenn Corbett's really good at what he has to do. Ultimately, in both films, you have like a really strong central performance that anchors the whole thing, right? Anthony Perkins in Psycho, or Joan Marshall here. But I think Castle did a pretty good job of getting like a solid supporting cast in for this movie as well. And yeah, I just feel like Castle, as the director, handles the tension and suspense really admirably. It doesn't come off as amateurish. It doesn't come off as a cheap imitation of anything. It's like I said in the plot synopsis, like, I think the fright break is gilding the lily, because I think you've already built a good amount of tension and you don't need this artificial tension building gimmick of the fright break.
So, I hear what you're saying. Psycho has some pacing challenges, but I don't necessarily think they are problems. Homicidal The pacing is really nice. As you said, like, I agree with all your points. Up until the fright break. And I think this is a good segue to a big problem I have with Homicidal. And that problem is this question of, is your gimmick in service of or in detriment to your story?
Mm-hmm.
And a great way to kind of illuminate this problem for me is to compare it with Psycho.
Mm-hmm.
So Psycho, its gimmick, you can't come late. Once the movie started, you can't come in. It kills off who you think is going to be the main character, and the money has no actual impetus to the plot. And Norman Bates is his mom. Or is like, you know.
Yeah.
He went back in time and gave birth to himself. What? For Homicidal, the gimmicks are who is Warren / who is Emily. Who is who, basically. Is Emily pretending to be Warren? Is Warren pretending to be Emily? And the fright break.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that the fright break happens just completely undercuts all the work that they've done leading up to that point. I kept wondering, like, will a little timer come up? Will, like, what's going to happen? And the fact that it's like a clock that takes up the entire screen and William Castle counting down literally for 45 seconds, it does not do anything to amp things up. It makes me go like, I was in the mood for the frights, and now I'm like stuck here listening to your voice.
This is not really something William Castle could control, but Castle really likes to appear at the start of his films and introduce them. And this feels like a very Hitchcockian thing, right? Except that as famous as Hitchcock was for these kinds of like introductions, and as much as Hitchcock made himself into a character, he did that for the TV show.
Yeah.
Hitchcock didn't do that for his films. For his films, he's just like a blink and you'll miss it cameo. He did a very famous trailer for Psycho where he did an Alfred Hitchcock Presents style, like introduction for it, really. But he doesn't really do that in the movies themselves. That being said, I think the reason why Hitchcock's version of that comes across as like dry black humor, and the reason William Castle comes off as like a carnival barker is partially due to something that Castle can't control, which is Hitchcock's accent. I think to American audiences, that kind of droll British accent turns all that into like dry wit. And for Castle, like the whole thing where it's like, all right, folks, it's the fright break, you know, get to the back of the theater now, 45 seconds.
Like that's literally how he sounds.
Yeah, it's sounds kind of like a carnival barker, right? And he doesn't, I don't know, part of me wonders, like Castle wanted to make himself a brand in the same way that Hitchcock did, to the point where like Castle has his own little like logo, right? Like Hitchcock has the little silhouette.
Yeah.
And Castle had this little picture of himself in a director's chair that was like his little logo that went on the posters and stuff. He wanted to emulate that thing, but part of me wonders if stuff like the fright break would be better handled, you know, if he had gotten somebody in to voice read, like you get Vincent Price to come in and just read a half a page. Like, I don't know if it would fix the problem that you're talking about with the pacing, feeling like it stops dead. But like personally for me, I didn't think it ruined the movie's pacing. I just felt like it wasn't necessary. It wasn't adding anything. It wasn't taking anything away for me, but it clearly did for you. And part of me wonders, like, would it be any different if, you know, instead it was someone being like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the fright break or something, like just, I don't know, a different performance style?
No, I don't think so. Like I'm thinking back to Castle's other gimmicks and like 13 Ghosts, for example. It's a gimmick that's integrated into being of service to the story, whereas this is literally an interruption.
I don't think 13 Ghosts, I mean, the list shows that we don't think 13 Ghosts is the best Castle picture, but it is interesting to look back over the pictures and think about the gimmicks and think about, are they part of the movie or are they apart from the movie.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean,
yeah.
right? Like, I feel like Psycho's gimmick of, like, you can't come late is ultimately in service of the picture.
Right.
And I think something like the 3D glasses or whatever it was for 13 Ghosts, I think the life insurance policy, like things that don't interfere with your experience of the movie during the hour that you are in a room with a white screen.
I think there's almost like 3 levels at play here. So, and 2 of them are good and 1 of them is bad. Basically, you know, is the gimmick part of the story or not? And if so, is it part of the film or not? So,
yeah, like the Tingler.
Right. So you look at Macabre. Macabre's gimmick is the life insurance policy. If you didn't know about that gimmick, you can still watch Macabre and the movie's fine, because that gimmick is completely separate from the story and the film. It's a completely external thing. House on Haunted Hill is the same way. House on Haunted Hill's gimmick was the glow-in-the-dark real skeleton that flew over the audience during the climax. Well, obviously, that's not a part of the film. That's something external. It also doesn't really have anything to do with the story. It happens when a skeleton comes out in the movie, but it's really just like an extra bonus jump scare for the audience in the theater. It has nothing to do with the film. If you watch House on Haunted Hill and don't know about that gimmick, the movie's fine. The Tingler is the first time we see the gimmick really integrated into the experience of watching the movie. And it is also integrated into the story, where the idea is the Tingler is loose in a theater, and it's a meta idea that it's the theater you happen to be in. The Tingler's the first one where if you didn't tell someone about the gimmick and then just had them sit down and watch the movie, they would go, wait, what's the deal with this part? Right? Like, what's supposed to be going on? It kind of hurts the movie, because if you don't have a theater rigged to electrocute people, not electrocute, but you buzz people, the movie doesn't play as well. But the gimmick is more integrated, and that could be seen as a good thing, because if you're going to be the gimmick guy, like, make the gimmick integral, right? This reaches its peak with 13 Ghosts. I think 13 Ghosts handles the gimmick the best of them all so far, because yes, it is this external thing, and it's participatory, and the movie doesn't work as well without it, but it's totally integral to the entire movie. It's not like the Tingler where it's one scene in the movie is this thing. In 13 Ghosts, you need to have the ghost viewer to really have the proper experience of that movie, and it ties in with a ghost viewer thing that they have in the film. And it's a blessing and a curse, because I think it's good craftsmanship to integrate it all together, but it also means that if you don't have the ghost viewer or all that stuff, the movie doesn't play as well. Whereas if you don't have the gimmick at hand for Macabre or House on Haunted Hill, those movies still play fine. So we get to Homicidal, and it's like a step backwards in a way, back to the life insurance policy, because the gimmick has nothing to do with the movie. It's entirely just like, oh, are you too cowardly to watch the ending? And it comes in, and of all the gimmicks to be directly integrated into the film, which started with the Tingler, at least the Tingler and 13 Ghosts were integrated into the story such that they are of a piece.
Yeah.
The Fright Break is integrated into Homicidal. You can't get rid of it, but it doesn't add anything to the experience or story of Homicidal the way that the Tingler and 13 Ghosts are. It's an entirely separate thing, the way Macabre was. So it kind of is like the worst of both. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I find it like detrimental, like not just like question mark, but an active like period when you don't want that, when you want an ellipses.
It's almost a case of like Castle. It comes off in a way as Castle not having faith in the strength of his own movie at this point.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to that earlier with like how he doesn't need it because of the strength of the tension he's already built.
Exactly. Like, he's been using the gimmicks to get people in for so long that now it's his trademark and he can't stop doing them. But sort of what's a good idea for a picture and what's a good idea for a gimmick aren't walking hand in hand here. And he doesn't need the gimmicks anymore. Like, I think he's good enough with this picture that this picture could play entirely, you know, without the fright break stuff, and it would be fine. And if the fright break was something that was just like you're told at the start of the movie, like, hey, this is how this is going to work, and maybe there was a little clock in the corner or something. I don't know. If it was less invasive.
Yes.
But it is, like, as you said, the full screen and a voiceover from Castle. And for me, it didn't ruin the experience because I still felt like we were trying to build tension using the fright break as like, hey, here we go. But it certainly brings you out of the movie. It brings you out of the story, because it's this big external thing. And if anything, I think it's in the tradition of like haunted house, carnival-y kind of stuff where it's like, hey, here comes the big thing. Are you man enough to do the big thing?
I think the difference with like a carnival ride or like a haunted house that you're walking through is you are literally actively walking.
Yes.
You set the pace.
The other thing is, a big way it hurts the film is it actually makes everything that comes after less scary.
Yes.
Not just for the way that it ruins the pacing, but because it reminds you that you're watching a movie.
Yeah, that too.
Like, ideally, the thing that causes you to have an emotional reaction to a film is an experience where you become kind of so immersed in the story that you don't literally forget you're watching a movie. Like, it's a flat screen, you're in a chair, like, but emotionally, you kind of forget and you get drawn into the experience. And to remind someone right before the big climax of your movie, hey, this is all fake, kind of undercuts everything. And it's especially weird because it is handled, you know, the voiceover and the overlay of the clock while we're doing a POV shot of Miriam walking closer.
Yeah.
So it is this really weird disconnect when instead you could have had a moment of total identification between the audience and the character.
Especially because before the clock comes up, we are hearing her heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And then the seconds, like the sound of the clock's second hand takes over the heartbeat. Yeah. It would have been so powerful to just have that heartbeat, maybe throw in some of her shaky breaths as she gets closer and closer to the door. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How much more powerful? Like, yes, you have your gimmick. Maybe that's when you, in the corner of the screen, you have the clock start going and maybe some text saying like, leave now or forever hold your peace, you know?
Right.
Like something else.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest problem with this movie. But honestly, like, as you said, everything leading up to it is done so well. The pacing, of course, but the cinematography, even like the music's fantastic.
Yeah.
It has such like a unique, like, side inspiration from Psycho with like emphasis on the strings, but it's done in such a melodic way that's so antithetical to the Psycho strings that it just like works to be its own thing while still giving such a unique identity.
I think you're right on that. I will say that I don't think the music was bad. It gets the job done, but like I too noticed this use of strings, but not the way Psycho uses them. And I have to give the points to Psycho, not just because, you know, obviously the Psycho music became so iconic, but because this score, again, I'm not saying this is a bad score. This is a good score, But compared to Psycho, it sounds more old-fashioned. And Psycho sounds like we're moving sort of what movie scores can be forward. I do really like the cinematography. I think it really does a good job of building the atmosphere and the mood. I also really like the production design.
I really enjoyed the sets.
Yeah. Like we pointed out kind of the European cutesy Dutchness of the town, but like the house is really well production designed. Like, God, after all of these episodes of this show, we have seen so many old dark houses where it's some big mansion and it's filled with bric-a-brac. And it's like, oh, there's the painting on the wall and the suit of armor and the big chest of drawers and whatever.
And the skull on the mantle.
And so often these feel like interchangeable sets that like it doesn't matter who owns this house or whatever's going on. They're all the same. And in this movie, when you were in the different rooms of the house, like this feels like this fits the characters, right? We have the nursery room with the toys.
That literally feels too small.
Yes.
Like, because we're seeing it as like adults and the characters are adults. Like it literally feels like I am too big to be in this room. And when you look at the hall, when you look at the door down the hall to Warren's room, the wall and the door have this very unique like pattern on it that almost it's so different from anything else in the house that it almost is like visually trying to tell you like something strange is going on behind this door.
They do the whole sequence where Emily's in Miriam's room in the middle of the night and doesn't say anything and just takes the doll and leaves and then doesn't start saying anything until she talks to Warren in the bedroom is really well done. Like there's a great shot of Miriam standing in the doorway of her room, like looking down the hall, just confused. And then you get this long shot. We don't go into the room, Warren's room, I mean to say. We just see it from down the hall, from Miriam's point of view, with the door open. And it has this great feeling of evoking like
a little kid seeing their parents.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, and looking down the hall and sort of seeing into a room that you don't often get to look into. And also that kind of like those late night childhood memories that you have that you aren't sure if they were real or not, right? Where you're like, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and everything felt weird and there was like a weird light on in a weird room and I saw something strange and I went back to bed and I have no idea if that's a thing that really happened or like a weird dream memory, right?
Yeah.
They do a really good job of evoking that. The production design does a really good job of selling you on, you know, Helga and her wheelchair and the study in the house with all the books and things, and
even just the choice for a stiletto dagger. Like it's so unique. I have no idea. Like they even comment on like, what kind of knife is this? Oh, it's a surgical knife. I have no idea if that's true because a stiletto dagger reminds me more of like medieval stuff. But like, what a unique tool to provide your murderess.
Even the Justice of the Peace's like house that they go into, which is like really schlubby and like, you know, you can feel that like him and his like
it's so cramped.
It's super cramped. Him and his like these are like over the hill people. Him and his wife, they're like very kind of like jaded and like, you know, he comes and does the like ceremony in like his undershirt and a house robe and like, yeah, just the production design, the set design, all really fantastic. The cast is pretty superb. Obviously, Joan Marshall's the standout. Glenn Corbett's a little bland, but that's not his fault. Like,
no, I don't think there's like a particular weak cast member except for whoever did the ADR. And that's not even like because they were bad. It was just like the wrong style of voiceover for what we needed for the performance.
It really, to me, sounds like someone voicing like a Hanna-Barbera or Filmation cartoon of the era if they were playing like the young kid, right? Like it, I don't know. Sounds like it should be the voice of like Johnny Storm or something. Like
I got more of a like I am a commercial announcer.
Oh, okay.
Buy your Coca-Cola today. Like, it just felt so, I think because every sentence felt like a statement, even if it's supposed to be a question.
Yeah, that's very true.
So I think that's where I was coming from.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm curious. Like, I could find nothing about who did this voice. And William Castle went to his grave saying it's Joan Marshall doing the voice and that they only dubbed it because of the teeth. And, you know.
I mean, if it is Joan Marshall, it's proof that voice acting is fucking difficult.
Yeah, I mean, because of what you said, where like it doesn't really connect with her performance on set, right?
Yes.
You'd think that she'd do a better job with that. But yeah, like it's just very, to me, if you told me that like Burt Ward did it or like Paul Frees or like Casey Kasem, like I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to ranking.
Okay, so because this movie still had a scene at the end where someone came in and explained the plot, it can't go above Psycho.
Yes, I did make that declaration in the beginning. I will say this movie's explanation scene, much easier to swallow.
It's mostly just because, like,
it's not trying to explain the psychological, you know? It's presenting, the film itself is presenting the psychological.
I think the other thing that hurts Psycho after all these years is that, like, we've had so many psychological thrillers since that just needing to explain, like, okay, so there are some people who, like, aren't right in the head. Like, the fact that you just need to, like, explain the basic concepts at play really hurts it. Anyways.
Some other signposts I want to call out here. Psycho's number 1, and then the top rated Castle movie is House on Haunted Hill, which is ranked at number 33, with Macabre right below it at 34. Would you like me to go first, or would you like to go first?
So I'll say that right away, I felt this was the best William Castle film we've seen so far.
I would agree.
So I made House on Haunted Hill my floor.
Okay.
And then basically just looked upwards from there, looking for kind of like where I would hit a movie that I felt was definitely better than this. And where I landed on that was Taste of Fear, which is at 20, which we just saw not too long ago. And I think that on a craft level, suspense, atmosphere, mystery, Taste of Fear wins for me. And maybe there's a world where I could have seen Homicidal and been like, oh, I don't, what? The twit, what? But I think I probably would have caught on to it just because Warren looks and sounds weird. I bring all this up to say that the reason I rank it below Taste of Fear is I do think craft-wise, Taste of Fear is better. But also Taste of Fear made me go, what the fuck is happening? Like multiple times. And I was like literally on the edge of my seat, like as that movie was happening. So my range here is 21 to 32.
That's fair. I think my range is within yours, honestly. So I similarly was like, okay, this is going above House on Haunted Hill. And as I was looking in here, my eyes fell upon I Married a Monster from Outer Space.
Yeah.
Which,
I thought a lot about that too.
Yeah. It has some similarities here in how much there is to mine from this movie.
Yeah. And the performance of gender.
Yes. So I was like, well, you know, I think you could make the case that this is better than I Married a Monster. So I kind of adjusted to make that my floor. And as I looked up, I looked at Le Diabolique.
Sure, yeah.
And, you know, the twist of he's like not actually dead and all of that. And I think in terms of like handling the extended mystery and everything that's going throughout Homicidal, I think Homicidal has a better mystery going for it.
Okay, sure. If Quatermass Experiment is your ceiling, then I would say we could put this above La Diabolique, below Quatermass.
Yeah, even just thinking about La Diabolique, which is like a thriller, you know, on that boundary line between horror and thriller. I think Homicidal does a better job of like thrilling you, like you could make a point of this being like psychological thriller and.
Yeah, this is the line of descent, right? Like Psycho descends from La Diabolique and Homicidal descends from Psycho, right? So so it's all related. I think
it's a step above La Diabolique, though.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Cool.
Coming in at the new number 27 is Homicidal from 1961, directed by William Castle.
If you would like to see this list, you can go to our website, screamscenepodcast.com. There you can find links to the many episodes that we have mentioned today, as well as our appeals box. If you would like to contest this or any other ranking, you can drop us a line through our Ask box on Tumblr or email us at screamscenepodcast@gmail.com or find us on Blue Sky.
Scream Scene updates every other Wednesday on SoundCloud, Spotify, and a whole variety of other podcasting apps. They're changing them every day. We're on YouTube Music now, for instance. If you want to make sure that you never miss an episode, try subscribing through our RSS feed. That'll make sure that piping hot new episodes of Scream Scene are delivered right to your door whenever they come out. Another way that you can help support the show is by leaving a rating or a review on the podcasting app of your choice, sharing the show on social media, in your favorite Discord, write a link to your favorite episode down on a piece of paper and mail it to someone you haven't talked to in a long time who lives in a different city. Spread the word. We really appreciate it. We'd also really appreciate it if you checked out our Patreon at patreon.com/screamscenepodcast, where you can sign up to become a patron of the night for as little as $1 a month. We really appreciate any amount of support you can give. At $1 a month, we will thank you on the air, as it were. $5 and $10 both get you access to different amounts of bonus content that we've created over the years. We're trying to produce more bonus content for the Patreon, but I acknowledge that it's slowed down from what it used to be like. We're trying to find like a more sustainable kind of model for that. But there's a ton of great stuff there in like the archives. So even if there isn't a lot of new stuff right now, there's a ton of old stuff that's a lot of fun to go back to. So I highly recommend checking that out at patreon.com/screamscenepodcast.
So Ben, what are we watching next week?
Next week, Sarah, we are back with Roger Corman and the second film in the Poe cycle at AIP. So this is the follow-up to Fall the House of Usher, starring Vincent Price. It's The Pit and the Pendulum, starring Vincent Price.
Well, we will see you then, creatures of the night.
Bye.
Bye.